Hello, DragonCon. Thank you so much for joining us on the Skeptic Track. Yay! Oh my goodness, what a full room. Thank you so much. We have a fantastic panel, obviously. So from my left, my far left here is Don Prothero, who is the author of 49 books and multiple scientific, like not even multiple, like hundreds with an S, scientific articles, and he teaches college geology. Right here is Jeff Hubbs. He is a consultant who works in energy systems and climate change, usually for academia. His favorite color is blue, and he wears a size 9 shoe. He told me to tell you that. To my right is Steve Novella. I don't know what size his shoes are, but he has big ones on this Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, where he's the captain of that juggernaut. And then next to him is Jim Underdown, who's the executive director of CFI West. And this is his first DragonCon. And let me just tell you guys, he's knocking it out of the park, don't you think? Yep. And at the far end is Nick Eftimyates, a super spy. So guys, thanks for joining us on the panel.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yep, so what's going on? This UFOs, UAPs, there's this big hubbub. My mom's into it. Talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Don, why don't we start with you?
Oh, well, it's just another sort of phase in what has perpetually been going on in U.S. culture pretty much since the 1940s. And it goes through pulses of up and down attention. And lately, because of congressional testimony last month, it got more attention than usual. But it's a big nothing burger as far as I'm concerned. There's really not much that has been said in this last month of attention that hasn't already been said before in some other form, and I think most of us, the panel, will probably can elaborate on that.
So when you say what has gone before, so we talked a little before on a previous chat about the Barney and Betty Hill.
Yeah, it goes back really, the UFO sort of mania in this country dates to the late 40s, especially 1947, when there was a famous example of a pilot who claimed he saw something strange up in Oregon and Washington flying above the sky that was skipping across the surface like a saucer, and the reporters garbled that into flying saucers, even though he didn't describe that shape at all. And that became a news phenomenon, which then was a giant thing during the summer of 47 all over the media. And it was ironically the same year, of course, Roswell happened, but no one noticed Roswell that year. And then from that point on, it just goes through ups and downs. There are times when the media just focuses and feeds on it, and it's in the media all the time, and therefore people seeing stuff, and then it fades off for a while, and then something else comes along and it stimulates it again.
So Nick, you're our super spy resident. So talk to us about Roswell.
Yeah, generally super spies aren't known. I just want to throw that out.
That's fair.
I take the super out of the spy. I'm a spy, everyone.
So just to clarify, which might help, I was Chief of Defense Intelligence Agency's Space Capabilities Division. I spent 7 years in the National Security Space Office, Chief of the Technology Division, dealing with space systems. So at least in my time, I've had some exposure to this.
You're the one hiding the alien body.
You know what? Just some things. So you can look at the 50s and that whole big UFO mania we had, and you know what? Ronald Reagan had the same thing in the 80s. That we had that fish came back at us again, where people had to go and do that. And now we have it again in the 220s. The only thing I see different about it this time, which there are a couple things, is that the technology's different. And I don't mean that as in the technology, for a UFO or anything. I mean, we're dealing with different technologies, and there's some unanswered questions on the technology that foreign governments have. That there are. And the way we're approaching it is differently now. Finally, someone's saying, look, we got to get a methodical scientific method in place here. The data's got to be screened and cleaned. We've got to start working on this. And that's a dreadfully boring thing when you start talking about data and scientific data and how that's got to be calibrated and all those types of things. And the American public falls asleep, 6 minutes later.
Okay. So y'all talk to me more about this UAP phenomenon. I know we talked yesterday about some stuff. Steve, I know you've got some opinions about brain malfunctions.
So, the UAP, that's the new term now. used to stand for unidentified aerial phenomena. Now it stands for unidentified anomalous phenomena, still UAP. They changed it because they want to also broaden the scope to include weird stuff in the water, not just in the air. So they just changed it to anomalous. But it's basically UFOs, right? People still call it UFOs. And the remarkable thing is how much nothing has changed. About 10 years ago, I picked up a book by Carl Sagan. Like, hey, Carl Sagan wrote about UFOs. It was like, and I didn't realize it was I thought it was recent. He wrote it in the 1960s, and I read it anyway. It was awesome. And what I realized from reading that book was how nothing has changed in 40, 50 years. There's all the same exact arguments, the same exact level of evidence, the same stories, and it was completely just a replay of what's going on right now. I do think there's been some iterative changes, but they had Project Blue Book back then. Now they have different organizations doing it, and they are saying, yeah, we really just need to standardize the reporting and collection of evidence. And okay, fine, that's helpful, but it's still crap. The evidence is still complete and utter crap. The standardizing the reporting methods aren't going to change that. It might help, communicate or analyze the data better, but the bottom line is we're still dealing. And if you read the thing that's interesting is if you read the government report, which I have, you read the recent reports that they've made, the Pentagon's made to Congress, et cetera. And it says, all right, we can conclude a few things about these UAPs, right? They fall into one of several buckets, right? One is they are misidentified man-made objects, right? Another one is they are misidentified natural objects. Another one is that they're hoaxes. And then another one is that we don't have enough information to know what they are. But you'll notice there isn't a category for identified alien artifacts. And they say specifically there is no evidence of any alien phenomenon. Like, we cannot conclude that about anything. The best we have is we have too little data to say what it is. That is it. That's the phenomenon. As I like to say, the fuzziness and indistinctness of the evidence is the phenomenon. That's what it is. Because anytime a piece of evidence is not fuzzy or blurry, it's a bird or something else. It's identified. Whenever it's identified, it's not an alien spacecraft. It's only the indistinctness, the ambiguity of the data is the entire phenomenon, other than the hoaxes, the deliberate hoax end of the spectrum. It's been the same way for 50 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were just talking on the side here. One of the things that has changed, so a lot of the early claims, like how many people know who Billy Meyer is? So Billy Meyer is this guy who was in Switzerland in the 60s, and he's taken 16 millimeter film of these crappy flying saucers. You could practically see the string holding the thing up.
You can literally see.
Yeah, sometimes you actually can see the string. And there's especially one that I love where there's a station wagon riding down the road right behind the UFO, and they just keep going. It's like, nothing to see here, Space Invader. So, it goes from 16 millimeter film to everyone's got an Instamatic. Now everybody's got a camera. There's billions, literally billions of cameras, and the evidence isn't getting any better. It's still this crappy stuff. And by the way, it's okay that the government's keeping an eye on what's going on in the sky. We have a vested interest in what's flying over our airspace. And some of it they know about and they're not going to tell us about. The first, B-1 bomber or stealth bomber, who knew what they were looking at when they saw that? No, nobody. That's an unidentified flying object. But it ain't Space Invaders. That's the point.
Jeff, what do you think?
Back in 2014, there was a debate held between Bill Nye of Science Guy fame from public television and a gentleman named Ken Ham, who is a prominent creationist. And the theme of the debate was, is creationism a viable theory for the origin of life on Earth? And near the end of the debate, the moderators asked them both a question. They said, given both of your opposing positions, is there anything that would change your mind that would make you switch your position to the other person's point of view. And Ken Ham answered first. Now I'll paraphrase what he said. Very sober response. He said, "My faith in God is absolute, and the Bible is absolute. As such, no. This is my belief system, and I believe creationism is the origin of life on Earth." Bill Nye, instead of giving a similar answer, like "I have faith in science," his answer was yes, evidence. And that is the nature of the scientific pursuit, is you let evidence take you places. And as Carl Sagan famously said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And like he was saying, we aren't just going around with instamatics anymore. 200 photographs from a half square mile area that were all pointing at the same thing moving, such that you can tell where each photograph came from with provenance that actually came from their phone. Okay, now we're talking. Now we have something we can look at and analyze because we've established some truth behind the origins of these photos. So that is, so when we are examining evidence, we need something that at least is as good as the uncanniness of the claim that's being made.
I mean, like that meteor, was it Tobolsk? That we had all those dashboard photos,
Sure.
or cams from
Yeah.
all different perspectives.
Chelyabinsk of the
Oh, yeah,
meteorite.
yeah.
I was going to follow up on Jim's point there. My dad worked for Lockheed and knew pretty much what was going on at Area 51, which I'll talk about later tonight. And one of the major things that contributed, and they found this out, of course, long after the fact, to a lot of the sightings in the western U.S. was spy planes, especially the SR-71 Blackbird, which my dad worked on. That plane flew at 90,000 feet, which is almost twice as high as an airliner, at Mach 3 when it was going full tilt. And it had a weird shape, especially from below. Mm-hmm. And when they started to finally do analysis, the Air Force did analyses of a lot of the UFO reports that were coming out of the western United States, a lot of them can be attributed to flights of that or other spy planes. There were prototypes that were shaped differently as well. And of course, they remained classified for a very long time. It's all been declassified. Mm-hmm. And the high percentage of what we used to have as UFO reports out of the western U.S. are all spy planes. Of course, the spy planes flew a long way from Nevada, too, so they were in many parts of the airspace. Mm-hmm. If you're a pilot at only 40,000 or 30,000 feet looking up at something at 90,000 feet, the sun is glinting off at a weird angle. It's nothing like a plane you've ever seen. Of course, it was top secret for a very long time. You won't know what it is. It's
That's going 5 times your speed.
Yeah,
right.
It's going very fast
Angie,
across the sky.
you know who doesn't report UFOs? All the world's telescopes, the professional telescopes.
Yep.
Thousands of professional, some of them multi-million-dollar telescopes. Has any of them reported a good UFO photo? No,
Nope.
not a one.
Nope. Steve, I see you have some pictures here.
Yeah, just so you have a visual impression of what we're talking about. So if you go to the slide deck, not a picture of me. They know what I look like. A picture of the UFO I'm showing. So I do think, thank you. I do think, so we've expressed the sort of basic skepticism about UFOs. I trust everybody in this room pretty much is already there. Let's go deeper, because I do think one thing that has changed recently is because the government, in my opinion, has fumbled the ball so badly on the public relations, the PR, explaining what's going on, and sort of giving the media the false impression that there is actually something interesting happening here. Even from fellow skeptics, I get emails like, yeah, but this seems like something different, right? That we're dealing with a different level of evidence here than we had in the past.
Well, they're doing congressional hearings now.
Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly. You have this David Grush guy who's like saying, yeah, there's like stadium-sized UFOs in hangars, and they have alien bodies. I heard some guy who knows another guy told me that they've seen this. He hasn't seen anything, not that he can talk about. But anyway, we're still talking about these blobs, right? That's still the level of evidence that we're talking about. What is different is that we have better instruments now. So they're saying, well, for some of these, we have like the camera from the plane, which is both visible light and infrared. We have ground radar also tracking it. And in some of these cases, the Pentagon is saying, yep, there's a physical object there. This is not a glint of light or whatever. There's definitely a physical object there, because we have multiple modalities of detecting something, and so there's something there. And then they also sometimes, and they're very careful in their wording, although this always gets sort of lost in translation to the media, they're saying it appears that it could be, traveling faster than physics should allow, right? It's doing things that seem to be impossible. So one of my skeptical rules of thumb is I always bet on the laws of physics. So far, it's worked out every time. And so, to the UFO enthusiast, the fact that it's breaking the laws of physics proves that it's an alien. Whereas I think it actually proves, or at least it's a stronger line of evidence that it's a misidentification. Like your assessment of how big, fast it's moving is wrong. And it's very easy for that to happen. All you have to do is just misjudge the angle of perception or the distance, right? If you get the distance wrong, then you get the size and the velocity wrong, right? And if you get the perspective wrong, you could think that something is like zipping off at a right angle at impossible speeds when in fact it just moved past you. And these things are all demonstrated, like these happen, where the cases where they do ultimately identify, oh, that was a plane at a distance, or that was a bird flying low over the water, and they pretty much clearly identify it as such, you can backtrack, you could reverse engineer to what was reported, and they're reporting all the same things about these. So the things that they thought were breaking the laws of physics did turn out to be a bird. So maybe that other thing when you thought they were breaking the laws of physics probably is also something mundane, and you're making the same kinds of mistakes. Mick Weston's doing a great job of, like, he's a photographer and knows things about perspective and whatnot. He's like, yeah, these guys are making really naive arguments when they're trying to piece together the argument that it is something unidentified. And if you do a proper geographic analysis, just use math properly, it's clear that this is something that's just floating with the wind. It's like sometimes these are Mylar balloons that are literally just traveling at the speed of the wind. But if you fly past a Mylar balloon at Mach 2, you could think that
looks like
that
it's
was
going Mach 2.
Yeah, it looks like it's going really fast, or it just disappeared, whatever, because you completely misjudged its distance. So it sounds superficially more impressive, and it's generating a lot of buzz, and the media has basically totally bought it hook, line, and sinker, because of course they did, because it's great headlines. But it's really, you just have to go a level deeper on the analysis, which collectively we have, and it's still just balloons and birds and planes.
Yeah, balloons is a big one.
It's a big one.
We got a call, real quick. We got a call at our investigations group in Los Angeles. Someone reported an alien life form flying over Ventura, and it did have this odd shape. It almost looked like a strand of DNA flying through the air. We're like, that's kind of cool. Zoom in on it a little bit. Came from a car dealership. It was a string of balloons. It just broke off. That's it. Doesn't look like something you would normally see in the sky, but don't go from, I don't know what that is, to alien life form. That's a massive leap.
That's a big leap. That looks like the bat signal.
A little bit, yeah.
It's the same kind of logic that would lead you to believe, go to Egypt, look at the Great Pyramids and say, I couldn't lift one of those stones with all my friends helping. Aliens had to have made it.
Well,
If I could just throw in a couple of thoughts for you to consider. So as I said, a lot of this is a data problem. And the fact is that the Pentagon is working hard on integrating the type of data. And there's one thing we do well in the U.S., it's integrate data from disparate sources, right? I mean, we actually tend to be pretty good at that. You do run into, and there are telescope pictures and things like that, bazillions of them. Ground-based telescopes are obviously not designed for that type of thing, right? I mean, you don't have a 2-meter telescope and swing it around and say, hey, let's take a look at that flying in the sky. It's just, that's not what you do with several ton system. However, that said, national security systems pick up stuff all the time. Systems that nobody ever admits to pick up stuff all the time. It takes a while for that stuff to filter down into where it can be filtered down to a top secret level, filtered down to a secret level, filtered down to a level that it can release it publicly. Okay, so what happens is someone screaming on the lower level, typically from the outside world, we saw this, we saw that, and my amateur telescope picked it up. Back here, a bunch of guys are sitting behind what we call a green door, and they're like, yeah, I know.
We know about it.
Right, we know about it, yeah, not a big deal. We know exactly what's going on. And that happens a whole lot. And in fact, sometimes in this world, to protect that's sitting way back there, they don't say anything. Because they say we can't, there's no way we can release this without someone on the other side of the planet saying, son of a bitch, they can do this, this, this. So it just, and that's a problem that you run into all the time with things.
So what's an example of something that they would have seen that is nothing?
Well, just, I mean, even things like bolides, right? You get explosions in the atmosphere that happen when asteroids hit, and then dozens a day, some ridiculous count like that. So, of course, the Defense Department, NASA has asked for that data a million times. We used to give it to them. I don't know if then they stopped for several years, trying to protect some type of capabilities that we had up. I don't know if they've turned on that spigot again, but just things like that systems are able to identify and know exactly what's happening, but the risk of that getting exposed at different classification levels isn't worth it. So there's really a dance on trying to figure out, how you can bring that out and bring it out in the most transparent way possible, but still protect your capabilities in the background. And unfortunately now that takes time. It's not something that a system just goes ka-ching, 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 and spits it out. So.
Yeah. And Don, there are geologic explanations, and people just don't understand the geology, right?
Yeah, well, back to his point, we have thousands of meteorites entering the atmosphere.
Right.
Every day, okay? They're mostly tiny, and they mostly either burn up, or if they're really tiny, they actually drift to the surface and become cosmic dust on the Earth's surface eventually. But, things like Chelyabinsk about 10 years ago are not that unusual. We just most of the time don't have human witnesses for them. And those are big enough to cause us a fireball in the sky, a true meteor. And then bigger ones happen beyond that. And so people forget how many things flying out of the sky are happening because we're always being rained on by cosmic material of all kinds.
I'm gonna ask maybe if somebody in the audience knows. First popular culture notion of a flying saucer, as far as in motion pictures or television. I'm thinking Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951 is a classic example.
Right.
Does anyone know of anything earlier than that?
The 47 flying saucer craze is one of the first
there'd
that
be
was public
that.
media.
Yeah.
I think aren't there comic books that have flying saucer images from before that time? Yeah, I'm sure there are comic books that did.
No.
Say again?
The movie, Earth versus a Flying Saucers, and it was based upon the the report that all the UFOs circled Washington, D.C.
And when was that?
I think that was maybe 52.
Okay. So this picture on
Wait,
the
did they
monitor
destroy
here,
DC? Did they destroy DC?
Actually, they did, yes. But they
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, I think there's a stop motion thing of it running into so this has been part of our popular culture notion for a long, long time. When I was a kid, like 10 years old, I was the UFO guy, okay? If you wanted to ask anyone about UFOs and listen to me go on all day, that would have been me.
Yeah.
I saw any book in a bookstore about UFOs, I'd buy it and read it, and I'd fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Well, I went to school. I started listening to people who knew what they were talking about, and I came to realize, well, this isn't really what's going on. But we do have a cultural system by which images and ideas about alien life persist that our science fiction writers will write things based on kind of zeitgeist-like ideas about what alien life is like. And by the same token, that when those things get transmitted back to us from pop culture, that informs our expectation of what alien life is like and what it would do and how it would behave if it were here on Earth. One of those books I had when I was a kid had all this elaborate math about how some flying saucer would have made some leaf-like motion. Now, I was 10. I have no idea how that math, if that math made any sense. It was all Greek letters to me. I didn't understand it. It was probably garbage. But I mean, not even close to anything even trying to be right. But my point is, instead of getting all wrapped around the axle about photos like this, stories of abductions and whatnot, there actually are scientists in the world who are trying to do the math. They are using survey observations from ground-based and space-based telescopes to try to get answers to the idea of where all could life be. There was one that I found last week. Their conclusion was, if you really want to look for evidence of alien life, don't look in this galaxy. Look at some other galaxy, because if you look at this one, well, obviously we live in a galaxy that hasn't been colonized yet. So this probably isn't a good galaxy for that, but maybe some other one is. But people are trying to actually run statistics based on what these telescope surveys are finding and really come up with answers. So don't go looking at Facebook at for some UFO pictures. Go to your librarian. Ask them to give you access to publication paper databases where there are scientists actually doing this work. Just read the abstract of the paper that sort of describes in more or less layman's terms what their paper is about. People are working on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, Seth Shostak was running the SETI project. I think Sagan founded, and then you know, but there's a difference, I think, between that hypothetical, like the Drake equation, that postulates what are the necessary components to have intelligent life, and being visited by aliens who are gutting cows and building pyramids, right? So what happened there? Well, I mean, because there really is sort of a scientific basis behind the first section and not so much behind the second.
Yeah, well, we could think abstractly about the probability of aliens visiting the Earth. It doesn't look good. The universe is an awfully big place. Interstellar space is incredibly inhospitable. Faster than light travel is probably impossible. So from everything that we know now, the idea that an alien civilization would bother to send like actual living creatures, you know, to our planet is pretty low. Especially, you know, they would make the trip all the way here just to what, you know, mutilate some cattle and hide. You know,
Cut the lips off.
right? I mean,
Crop circles, yeah.
one thing, just speaking of, make some crop circles, you know.
Dump somebody out on top of a Long John Silver's.
One thing that's interesting, again, if you look at, you know, 'cause most of us on this stage have been doing this for a long time, and if you read back even literature from before our time, is going way back to the 50s. There's always in the UFO community has been this sense that the big reveal was just about to happen. It's right around the corner. You know, in 5-10 years, they're going to make the big announcement that they've had the aliens in the basement the whole time and whatever. And it snares a generation's, you know, imagination, and then they get bored and they move on. But then, you know, 10 years later, there's another generation coming up like, wow, this is about to happen, you know. So we've seen this probably collectively up here. We've seen this cycle a few times. We're in the middle of another cycle, and that's it. And people will lose, you know, interest as soon as they realize that nothing is happening. There isn't going to be any big reveal. I love the fact that, you know, I was reading again about like David Grush's testimony. So you have somebody working for the government giving testimony to the government, but the fact that the government is hiding information.
And they don't know that.
Yeah, and like we need to get to the bottom of this, right? But that was all a big show thing. It was really about like see there is a deep state. That was kind of what that was really all about. The fact that it was about UFOs was kind of incidental to the whole thing that was happening. But it's like, so who is this in the government that's hiding things from the government that Congress can't even get to the bottom of? And do we really think that Donald Trump wouldn't have blabbed this to the world if he knew about it? I mean, just saying, you know. I just think, you know, it becomes a grand conspiracy that could not possibly be sustained over 50 years, especially when it would have to be international. And again, like Grush is saying, like, oh yeah, every world government knows about this. Really? They're all hiding it? They're all that good at hiding? And you also think about the fact that which always kills me. It's like, so you're assuming that if there ever was any major alien event, the government would be the first ones there? That doesn't happen. Whenever anything actually does happen, the New York Times always beats them to it. Or just some guy with a cell phone. And then once it's on the internet, you're done. There's no way they're going to get to every single event and put it under wraps before anybody with a cell phone gets there. It's just, it's impossible. But the more you think about it, the more you realize how completely unsustainable the UFO narrative is. The alien, that these are UFOs or aliens narrative. It's completely unsustainable.
Well, I got a challenge for David Grush, and I was screaming at the TV while I was watching it. I'm like, show us a body, man. Stop bullshitting around. Don't tell me about what he said and what she said. Show us a body and show us. He keeps talking about alien technology that's in a warehouse somewhere or whatever. Show it to somebody who counts in the government. And I'll tell you right now, see this finger right here? I bet this finger that he does not come up with the goods. I'll bet this finger. Now, you were talking about SETI a second ago, and the SETI people, Seth, and everyone else at SETI will be the first ones to admit this is a long shot. Listening to the skies is a long shot. Not only are the distances great, like Steve said, but you also have a time issue. That civilization has to be at a point where they are detectable right at the point when we're able to detect it. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, which is a snapshot in human history, there's no 100 years ago there's radio, but 150 years ago there's no radio. There's nothing except light escaping planet Earth, and maybe our gas signature. That there's reasons to believe there's life here, but not in terms of something that's going to travel several galaxies away. So this timing really has to happen as well. But I think probably everybody up here is reasonably confident that life in some form exists in other places in the universe. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about life coming here in this form.
It's an awful waste of space, I think Richard Feynman said.
Tremendous waste of space.
Yeah. So we have a microphone in the middle of the aisle here. If you have questions, this is a very full room, so we would be happy to entertain questions unless you guys have any other pre-prepared things that you want to address.
While people are gathering at the mic,
oh yeah,
there was back in the 40s, the physicist Enrico Fermi, who was the scientist who developed the first self-sustaining nuclear reaction. He was sitting with his colleagues at lunch at Los Alamos, and they were just sort of idly talking about the idea of extraterrestrial life. And finally, Fermi said, "Where are they? Why are our skies not lousy with UFOs? Why isn't it obvious to us, from what we can observe, that there's extraterrestrial life all over the place?" And he and numerous other scientists have tried to develop answers to that question. And one possible answer that at least matches the observation we have is we're the first, or nearly the first. So much so that we are effectively alone. Another possibility: no one makes it out alive. In other words, an intelligent civilization. There's a series of filters sitting out in front of every potential intelligent civilization. And if you get past one filter, there'll be another and another until there is a filter so impassable that no civilization gets past it. And that's one possible solution to the Fermi paradox. And again, what I was saying earlier about people trying to run statistics, how long does a planetary system have to exist before it forms a planet that can sustain life? Scientists are trying to build up those hypothetical maps in time now.
Okay, so we've got a question there. Don't touch the mic, please.
It's on.
But get closer, though, because you'll get a lot of feedback otherwise. Get close.
All right, so this question touches on the topics that the two gentlemen at our left have talked about. So the first is specifically about David Grush's congressional testimony. The first is that you said he was unable to show us the bodies. And I don't know if you've ever signed an NDA, but the implications of him doing it were greatly restricted. He was denied a SCIF by the DOD. The second part of that was that the core allegation of his testimony was that of fraud on the part of the big four defense contractors in the DOD. These UAPs are basically uncongressionally oversighted spending on hidden capabilities that we can't show. So the question to you would be, how can we as a public look at a DOD that can't pass an audit and ignore the fact that there's some potentially hazardous safety things for our pilots in the air there? And how do we as skeptics continue that conversation?
Yeah, I think this one's mine. Look, there are things that are not shared all the time. They're not shared in government. They're not. I mean, that's what SAPs are, special access programs, right? And I've been briefed into well over 100 of them. So, and they're not shared with anyone outside that group. That not shared in the three-letter agencies, not shared anywhere. So that stuff exists. Even in working with Congress, there are times, and this has been historic, that there are times that 2 or 3 senators will be briefed, and that's it. That satisfies the need to brief Congress. I mean, there is no, it has to go on a paper through everyone in Congress so that they get to see the most super secret capabilities that we have that we've invested billions into. It just does. You go up and you talk to Senator X, Y, and Z and say, Senator, this is what we got. This is what we think we're going to do, and we're going to hitch up for another $1 billion to do this. And they take a look and say, wow, cool stuff, Nick. And that's it. So you never get a uniform response across the Congress or across the government. So, and it's the only way we maintain, capabilities.
But that, just to clarify, that doesn't fit the UFO narrative, because they're saying, and Grush is saying, that they're not even reporting to 2 or 3 senators for congressional oversight, that these are like black ops that are happening off books. But there's no evidence of that. And of course, if that's what he really thinks is going on, and then you're sitting in front of Congress, and Congress is asking you, tell us what's really going on. Well, there's no NDE or whatever that's going to silence you at that point in time. Now, presumably, he gave closed-door testimony to Congress where he was able to give the full story. Where's that? Where's that information? Maybe it's all going to filter out eventually, and I'll be happy to be wrong. If the evidence comes to light, great. But again, I think all of us up here would predict this is absolutely nothing is going to come out of all of this. And it just doesn't hang together. And again, there's also the idea of time. I remind you of Iran-Contra, right? With another off-the-books kind of black ops that went all the way up to the president, apparently. Even if they didn't prove that. But that fell apart within a couple of years, right? There's no way they're going to have a football-sized UFO hidden somewhere for 50 years,
exactly.
Off books, and they've successfully kept this from Congress the whole time, from any oversight. But think about it this way: you have a black ops operation that's going on. Every time there's an administration change, there's an opportunity for him to say, "Hey, the last guy was lying to you about this."
No, this is nope.
You don't think that would happen?
No, I don't.
Why am I wrong?
Sorry, been there, done that.
Yeah.
So I would worry more about not keeping it from Congress and not keeping it from other agencies. But stuff is done all the time. But if you're talking about the UFO lore, now you're talking about generations of people that have to go through. I mean, someone spends their entire career doing something, security officers, IT security, all these people that have layers and layers and layers of scientists and security people and people doing construction and people who's feeding everyone, in certain sectors in Area 51 or other, off-site places. There are generations of people that are doing this. So you're going to keep, if you're talking about something that exists, we've had these bodies for years. Really? And in all that time, the last half centuries, no one's got up and said, hey, look, I snuck in and took a photo?
Yeah,
That's
No.
what
I know. But if you're talking about Congress and the bureaucracy, that they tend to slice out pretty well.
well,
But
they
if
have
you're
to keep perpetuating their own stuff, so you don't want to be the one to give that stuff out. But we're not talking about black ops, and we're not talking about, Clinton's blowjob or Nixon and Watergate or anything like that. This is the biggest story in human history. And no one has gone in there and taken that picture or come out and screaming and saying, holy shit, there's an alien body there. The one alien body Fox did that stupid autopsy show on was so fake and so lame. I mean, it's like that Bigfoot show. They never found a Bigfoot. The show's been running 4 years. They're never going to find a Bigfoot. It doesn't exist. So that's got to be your first. What's the overwhelming message here? Is that it's not there. That's Occam's razor. That's the simplest answer. Is that it's a nothing burger. There's nothing here.
Because some guard walking in at night would have gone like this with his phone.
Yeah.
Next to that body.
honey.
That's what you see on Facebook.
Hey, honey, look at the picture I just took.
In the talk that I give tomorrow about moon hoax claims, I talk about the difference between a good conspiracy theory and a bad one. A bad conspiracy theory requires thousands of people's participation in ever unspooling layers of involvement. Where are the deathbed confessions? Where is the envelope full of traceable documents dropped across the transom of a major newspaper? It doesn't happen. A good conspiracy theory, on the other hand, involves a very limited scope and a very limited number of people who would have to know it.
Who are mostly dead.
Yeah, mostly dead.
Okay, so next question.
Okay, I may get in trouble for this, but I'm going to say it anyway.
All right, get out of
Okay.
here.
Don't make us come back there.
All right, I've been reading about UFOs since I was 10 years old. I got interested in it. I actually joined MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. I was actually head of investigations for up in the East for about 4 years.
We got two spies in the room now.
And I've become friendly on a personal basis with a lot of the, quote, UFO experts that are in the thing. And after about 10 years, I left. Why did I leave? Because the stuff I learned about when I was a kid is the same thing that they're talking about now. You're right. Absolutely. Nothing has changed. And in fact, you know what? I'll tell you what has changed. People take the UFO theory and they make money off of it because they know people are going for it. But no bodies, no nothing. I was involved with some of the top people there. Nothing. Nothing at all. Always the same things from like 10, 15 years ago. It's ridiculous, and that's why I left.
Good for you.
Yeah, time is always like the ultimate factor there with lots of things. Like Atlantis, 50 years ago they thought, yeah, we'd have museums full of Atlantean artifacts in 10 or 20 or 30 years or whatever, and there's still nothing. Eventually, if JFK really were, a conspiracy, maybe they could have hid it for a little while, but eventually these things are going to come to light. Generations go by, things will come to light, but
Many people related stories about waking up in their beds, unable to move and surrounded by beings staring at them while they lie there immobile. These beings were fairies. These stories were being written 200, 300 years ago.
Or incubuses.
Well, and that's got a very well documented.
Sleep paralysis.
Yeah, it's a neurological phenomenon. It happens to me at times. But, it's true. But it's a completely neurological phenomenon. But we know it. If you look at Whitley Strieber's book, Encounters, and he documented all these cases of encounters with aliens, and fully 70 to 80% of them were hypnagogic hallucinations, were neurological episodes. They had all the telltale signs of it. Any neurologist would go, you probably have a sleep disorder or whatever. And he was a horror writer. Yeah, he was a fiction writer. Yeah.
All right, next question.
A thing I saw was that more evidence is based on the exoplanet surveys that they have done, since we've talking about new telescopes that show that the configuration that our planets are in is less than 1% likely from all the ones that they have surveyed. So if this condition is necessary for intelligent life, it's not as common as you would think, given the number of planets they found.
I'd say two things about that. One is that the surveys are biased because we're looking for the planets that are easiest to detect, and that's not Earth, because we have a short period of 1 year, and we're a small planet close to the sun. We're much better at detecting bigger planets or farther away from their parent star. So astronomers recognize that it's not a random sampling of exoplanets, that there's biases in the sample. So they're still not willing to say yet we know what the probability of an Earth-like system is. The other point is that you don't necessarily need an Earth-like system to have life. And we do need to sort of expand our definition of what potential locations of life is. So I would say the jury's still out on the probability, like how many systems out there are systems that could contain a technological civilization. I think at this point we still don't know.
Well, let's not forget that 1% of trillions is still a lot of.
Yeah, it's pretty substantial. Like millions upon millions.
Yeah.
Yep. Next question.
All right. Well, I don't know why this thing is so dang tall.
Yeah,
but
step,
all right.
step closer
yes.
though, because you'll get some
Oh,
feedback
why is-
otherwise.
Yeah, it's magic.
There you go.
It's happy to see you.
Well, not. Oh, it's weird now. Oh, well, now I made it weird. Well, don't grill me on this, but I'm a little bit of a believer in some stuff. I just like to keep an open mind. But I've read it and seen a lot of stuff. It's like, why do we have so many high-level officials, astronauts, pilots? Now, why do they all report, like, seeing something at least?
Yeah, they
Because
all
there's a
report.
lot of unexplained stuff out there.
Yeah,
We
they
just
don't all
understand.
report it. And let's not forget that just because you're a pilot means that you know everything what you're seeing up in the sky. I mean, I've seen planes at an odd angle that look like missiles. I've seen all sorts of things that don't look like themselves. And usually these are brief encounters. And if you really don't know what you're looking at, whether you're a pilot or a physicist, it doesn't matter. You can still make a mistake and misidentify something.
They still have the same brains every other human being has, and they're still susceptible to all of the misperceptions. And if you read the reports of the pilots, a lot of them make very naive statements about their perceptions and their ability to perceive things. So they're just falling for the same things that everyone else is. The reason why we're getting a lot of reports from pilots is because they're up there, and they're looking at stuff, and they have their cockpit cameras, et cetera. So they're a likely source of these things, and because they are given more credibility because of that. But they are making the exact same mistakes that everybody else makes.
And there's another part to this too. Just remember, the unexplained is not necessarily unexplainable.
Right.
Right? We keep forgetting. If they're saying unidentified, that's all he means unidentified. It does not say that we can definitely prove it's something not explainable. And we have to, as scientists, as I as a scientist, have to remember that we have to withhold judgment when we don't see something we understand yet. We don't jump to the conclusion that it's some alien or something we cannot explain. We just withhold judgment. And most of the time, the longer we look at it, the more likely we'll find out it's something simple.
Yeah, you also, as I've said, as you've said, there's Lockheed Skunk Works and Boeing Phantom Works and, all these companies that are out producing different stuff that your government is paying for. There are also foreign governments out doing stuff. So, the Defense Department tends to see that, and someone comes up and says, "I've seen this," and they go, "Yeah, thank you for your interest in national security. We appreciate that."
We know.
And and the person walks away going, "What a bunch of morons," and they're like saying, "Yeah, that's just what I am." It happens all the time.
Yep. Hi there. Next question.
Before you begin, ask me what I want. Ask me what I want. Information. Information.
Yes. I'm kind of surprised that one of the very likely explanations hasn't been discussed, and I know at least one other person on the panel knows that that infrared imaging device that generated that picture, its full capabilities are classified. They can't talk about it. Also, if you've ever had a clearance, you learn one of the number one tools for managing information is disinformation. One of the greatest spreaders of false UFO information is the U.S. government, covering its tail.
Do you have any specific examples you can give us on that?
Well, they can't tell you about that image. They can't tell you that they know more about it than you do.
How do you know they know more about it?
Where'd the image come from?
It's classified.
And I actually witnessed one of the cover story events back in '89 in Phoenix.
No, wait, let's go back to this image.
Okay.
I don't want to let it go. And the reason I say that is because that type of disinformation is illegal, for the government to actually do. So they'll say we can neither confirm nor deny, and you hear that term a lot, but they won't put out a blatant lie about something because there are too many follow-on consequences that can come out of that.
Well, you're right. That's exactly what they use, that special wording that Steve pointed out.
Right.
Very special wording that just leaves the door open. That must be
Well,
an
they want to
alien.
be very exact. That's why government, like, UAP, right? For unidentified anomalous phenomena. Who comes up with that type of wording? I'll tell you, actually, Sean Kirkpatrick, because he's a friend of mine, and he's the one running that office. They try and be very, very exacting in the wording just so that people can't, I say, so it'll make people fall asleep, but, they'll say so people can't run off with that and talk about it in a different direction. But if we are going to say the government is putting out disinformation, okay, then you need to say, and this is my example of it. And you've highlighted that particular case, and so you need to be able to say extraordinary claim.
Well, it's very common in classified programs for you to be given a false program, so you don't have to say the program I'm working on is classified. You can say I'm working on this other program.
Yeah.
That's very common.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
I just lied.
Oh, well, they lie all the time. I'm not saying that.
The government told me to lie.
Yeah, but
I lied.
But you're making a specific case about a specific capability, right? You're coming out. You're saying that they know about this capability. It's an IR system that has advanced capabilities that they're not talking about.
Right.
And that what's your evidence to say that? Do you know about the system specifically?
Well,
have you worked on it?
They have come out and said that system has capabilities that are classified. That is true.
Okay, I don't know that, but I'm going to take your word for it.
But the F-18, so they can't describe everything. Because of that, they can't talk about the classified parts of it. So obviously, something is missing. And it's the classified aspects of that image.
Does that make a difference in the conclusion?
No, but what it does do is it allows them to use the weird wording to allow people to think this could be an alien. That special wording, you say they specially do it so they don't do that. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about here. People are taking that wording and running off with it.
I think that wording is actually designed to be more exacting as to what they're doing. And in the case of anomalous phenomenon, I think the intent here is not to say UFOs, right? Because now you have a stamp unidentified flying objects. Well, half the stuff is already identified inside the government, so that's not an accurate term. They're also looking at things, as we say, surface and subsurface systems that are also either identified, but you can't put that under a UFO coverage. So I get what you're saying, but I think it's the government's more attempt to be exact in their wording, so it doesn't leave a misconception and it's certainly not disinformation. Disinformation is putting out a blatant lie. That's different from saying we're not going to tell you all the capabilities of this system.
We're here because we sat through a whole hearing before Congress generated from it. So if its intent was to not cause that, I think they missed the mark.
I'm curious as to which set of lights you saw in Phoenix. Was it the flares or was it the squadron?
The squadron. Yeah, it was obvious. There was an earlier sighting of a triangular aircraft.
Yeah.
And then they flew the squadron of F-16s behind South Mountain with their navigation lights on only in a triangle so that the next day they could go, well, that was just a flight of airplanes. So you're aware of that one?
I'm aware that they were trying to cover the tracks that it was an actual UFO.
No, that it was a classified airplane that accidentally flew too low over Scottsdale earlier, which we know about now. It was back then. It was the
I thought it was a squadron of Canadians that were flying in formation. That's why it looked huge. Right?
Not geese. Yeah, not geese.
Yeah, not geese.
Not geese.
Yeah, Canadian. Yeah.
It was F-16s out of Kelly. that did it. And that was the next day. They said, yeah, we were flying out there. And it was another triangle on the other side of town. And it covered, that's what everybody was talking about now, was those lights and not what was seen earlier in the evening over Scottsdale.
So you're saying the first day was something we don't know about, and the second day was done as a cover for the
Yes.
first day.
Well, something the government knows, but something we know about now, because now we know about the stealth aircraft. We know about the triangular-based aircraft, the F-117. This was in 89. Yeah.
This is how the UFO crowd covers it. It took them a long time ago to come up with that cover story. This is the first time hearing of it.
Well, I don't think you're saying that there's aliens in
Oh,
any
no.
of this. This is just
The government covering a mistake. Yeah.
They're covering
but
the first batch. Oh, okay.
And there also was, like, in the 90s, I know it came out that the Air Force, they essentially, they don't put disinformation out there, but they allow UFO stories to propagate when they know the answer.
Right.
When they could shut them down. Because they're like, great, let everybody think it's aliens so they won't know it's our spy craft or whatever. That's
Right.
okay.
Right.
Yeah, that was part of Area 51.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's all. That's all we're talking about.
They do that all the
here.
time. Yeah.
They allow. They in fact were happy that there's this, basically auto-generated disinformation campaign that has nothing to do with them. Their hands are clean. The UFO. Let the UFO community provide the cover story for our spycraft. And we just won't say anything. We won't correct the record.
So you're saying the government is funding MUFON now?
They don't have to. It happens all by itself. All right, thanks.
If there was ever a novelist in here, that's a great story.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Oh, we got another question.
Magic.
Yep. Magic Mike. There you go.
I mean, because anything that you can't explain yourself is considered magic, right? So,
If the technology is sufficiently advanced.
I got in here late because I was trapped on the Skybids. I got here at the end of that video. Did you debunk the Tic Tac video and saying it was a balloon, basically? Is that what the...
That wasn't the Tic Tac video.
Yeah, we didn't show the Tic Tac video.
No, let me give this guy a plug. Mick West has done great work in this regard. He took the top 8 or 9 best UFO claims and one by one reverse engineered what the cameras were seeing, what the pilots were seeing, did the calculations, did everything. Go to metabunk.org, and he goes through all this stuff and really gives some great explanations.
And one thing I would certainly want to stress the importance of, what he was just saying, there's nothing like showing your work. I mean, if you want to make a case for either a claim of something being true or a claim of something not true, show lay out the math and so that other people can examine it. Many eyes make all problems shallow. There's a lot to be said for just don't just wave your hands about this can't happen. Well, show why. I mean, we're all working with the same math. We're all working with the same physics. We're all working with the same natural laws. If other people can confirm the same finding, good. That's the scientific process operating.
Excellent, excellent. So I don't see any other questions, but boy, was this terrific. How about for these guys, right? Fantastic. So I want to give y'all here this last minute and a half. I'd like to give y'all for shameless plugs. Don, I hear you got a new book or 7.
I've got a
coming
couple
out.
of books coming out. Yeah, not on these topics, but
No.
yeah, I have a book about climate coming out from Columbia, and another book about California geology. So those are my 2 upcoming projects. But the one that's relevant to this is a book I wrote a couple of years ago with Tim Callahan on UFOs and aliens. So I'll talk about tonight at 8:30. So.
Excellent, excellent. And Jeff?
See, I have a panel on, right here Monday at 10 o'clock called Cratering the Moon Landing Hoax. It was a talk that I originally did in Science Track in 2013 and Space Track in 2013. And I've readapted it for a more skeptical audience.
All right. Steve?
I have other panels and stuff coming out on the Skeptic Track, but I'll just say that the Skeptic's Guide to the Future book just came out in paperback. So if you haven't picked it up yet, you can get the paperback version.
Yep. All right.
We are doing a web series called Skeptalab. The Bunk Stops Here. and we debunk all sorts of wacky beliefs. And actually, two people on this panel. Don was on our dowsing episode with Andy Richter from the Conan O'Brien Show, and Steve's on the upcoming one we're doing on death and the afterlife and ghosts. So it's a lot of fun. We get some humor worked in with explanations of wacky beliefs.
Excellent. Nick?
We actually have at 5:30, right? A good, I think what's going to be a great one on artificial intelligence. So that should be pretty good. I'll be here for that. And I think I have a 7 o'clock on spies with what used to be the old Sheraton Hotel.
Yeah, the not Sheraton. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm Dr. Angie. Thank you so much for joining us on the Skeptrack. We'll see you shortly. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Mhm.